Okay, Rabbi Say, as you know or you don't know, I am in the middle of Shabbat Brachas now. Married off a daughter last night. So we'll a little bit talk about in Yana the Yoima. As to why I'm here tonight, you know what they say, the Shir must go on. Somebody told me, anyway, Parasha Vayetzei, this is the week for Shabbat Brachas. It says, Malei Shvu Azois. And one of my Einaklach even said, Zaidi, this is Mamish the Parsha. It's the Parsha, and she even showed me that, you know, the schools, they make Parshas Vayetzei, they have this like Chasana invitation, where it says Yaakov marries Rachel. Yes. And then, you know, it says the Shem Akala is Lavan. So I said, great, you know. I always wondered about the day after a wedding. And the reason that I can kind of relate to this is because I am guilty of it as well. You know the feeling when you meet somebody the day after the wedding and you realize you missed his wedding? And you're like, you know? So, over the years, that being that Baruch Hashem Berev Chazdei Hashem Yisbarach, I was able to make several weddings. Just as shtick, over the years, I wrote down some of the excuses people have why they didn't show up to the wedding. What I would like to share with you tonight is, you know, the cream of the crop, so to speak. I'll never forget, I really think, unless he's listening to this and I blew it, but I really think this took a tremendous amount of gevura on my part. I married off my first son, and there was someone who was a close friend of mine, at least I thought he was a close friend of mine. No show. And he meets me the day later and he goes, you know, your wedding. He goes, it's just that you realize I had yard site Monday night, and you know, there's an Indian, people don't go to weddings on the night of the yard site. Let me tell you, it took tremendous strength on my part not to remind him that the wedding was Tuesday night. You know what I mean? But I held myself back. I said, I understand, Monday night you had yard site. Yes, I understand. I had one guy that once told me, now you know that around wedding halls in Borough Park, parking is not the easiest thing in the world. So I had more than once, people told me that we came to your wedding, and we circled and circled and circled, and we realized that there was no parking. We just rolled down the window, honked and said Mazel Tov, and drove on. What do you guys have to double park and come down and tell you Mazel Tov, come up and get a ticket, or have 30 people angry at me? You know, I'll never forget one instance where someone told me, "No, I missed your wedding." Yeah, okay. See, sometimes you don't know the person missed your wedding. That's the problem with excuses. You know? Someone comes over to you, "Oh yeah, I missed your wedding last night." You did. Well, now I know you missed it. I would have never remembered. Okay. So he tells me, you know, the reason I missed your wedding is because my cousin got married last night. This time I couldn't hold myself back. I said, "Did you go to your cousin's wedding?" He said, "No." It's like the comic Rav, you know. So he said somebody once came, he went to someone for tzedakah. And the guy said to him, "You know that I have a brother that's starving to death?" He says, "Are you helping your brother?" He says, "No, so for sure I'm not helping you." You know? So I understood what he meant. He didn't go to his cousin's wedding, so of course it didn't come to mine. Right. I once had someone who told me I would have gone, I didn't remember which hall it was. I said, "I met you a day before, I told you in Vishnitz." He said, "Yeah, but there's one in Borough Park, there's one in Williamsburg, there's one in Muncie." Didn't tell me which one. Maybe one of your Shalayim, right, you know. I must tell you that I have had this experience of going to the wrong hall the night of weddings. I don't know if you ever do that. I did it once. I drove all the way to Williamsburg to a wedding, which was in Borough Park. And the worst was, it took me a half hour to park, and I went in and I'm like dancing, you know. I'm wondering, I don't know anybody here? Well, finally, at least I know the Mechutin. Then I saw I didn't know the Mechutin. And I said, of course, everyone stopped. Those people did recognize me, say, "Why are you here?" I said, "The other side." Yeah, I don't know why you're here, but I'm here on the other side, you know. One guy told me that the reason he didn't come to my wedding is because I know both you and your Mechutin. He stopped over there. So the rest is the Idach Zil. Go explain it. I don't know. I guess he figured like this, that I could always think he didn't come because he's angry at my mechutton, and my mechutton could think he didn't come because he's angry at me. So why should he come? I want to tell you, this works the other way also. After you make a wedding and you see people and you realize you forgot to invite them. So of course there's the commentaries that your invitation came back. You know what I mean? Came back from the box to the table. A lot of mail comes back before weddings. You should know. I once asked someone if this is sheker or not. If I tell a guy your invitation came back. So someone suggested, and I could do this. I mail a blank invitation. Of course, it comes back because there's no address. So I said, "Oh, it was your invitation that came back." I couldn't figure out whose one it was. So you make like a stam invitation, and that's the one that came back. I think the best one though I ever had was why the person didn't come to the wedding. He says, "I want to tell you that the reason I didn't come was because I knew you would be pressured to give me a bracha by the chuppah." What was I supposed to say? No. What matter if I had a half a minute giving you a bracha by the chuppah? What is your problem? And if you know Rav Chazan, Zecher Tzadik L'Vracha, I was zeichet to learn by him for 2 years. He had an amazing sense of humor, and he had life down to the pack. He never went. He went once. He was Masada Kedushin once. He had a problem. When he used to read, he had to lift his glasses. So here he had to lift his glasses and hold the becher and hold the siddur, and he finally made the bracha. He said it's a nest that the makna and Kedushin brings down the nusach of the bracha. So he knew how to do it. So anyway, when they called him up to come for the siddur Kedushin, he just stood there. He didn't come. He just stood there. So they told him, "They're calling you." He said, "Why do people want siddur Kedushin? Because you get to make a bracha? So you make 100 brachas every day. No one's fighting for it." He says they like it because they call you up. So-and-so is mechubed with siddur Kedushin. He says, so if you don't go, they call you twice. So you have double the amount to cover. He said, "What to do?" By a chasana, by the way, who's expecting a bracha, because they always sit in the back, right? It doesn't look good when you sit in the front, then they call you up. It's like they sit in the back, everyone goes, "Oh, me, oh," Whenever a guy's expecting a bracha, he's in the back, and you have to make this surprised face. "Oh, they call me? Oh, really? Oh, really? Why?" Then you come up. The Mesillas Yesharim says that there's two kinds of Baalei Gaiva. There's a Baal Gaiva who demands to sit by the Mizrach Vant, and there's a Baal Gaiva who demands, he's too smart for that. He says, but there's a hidden Gaiva in him. He doesn't. He sits in the back. Me? No. But you want shishi? No. It's not necessary. Siddur Kedushin? No. Santa Claus? If you insist, but he has a little. He's the same Baal Gaiva as the first one. He just has a little more brains. Yeah, the Mesillas Yesharim calls that a different level of Gaiva. I think that second level kind of takes in 99.9% of humanity into all of it. People have different ways of. I tell you, I was once sitting on a train, and this man next to me, he says to me, "All chazanim are so hot as I am over here," like you say. All chazanim are so hot. Goodness. It's interesting. I told you this when I was in Australia. I went to one place. They sat me by the Mizrach Vant. I was really very, very flattered until I realized that in Australia they daven toward Marav. I realized Mizrach is Marav, Marav is Mizrach. Up there in Yenevelt, it's also Mizrach is Marav, Marav is Mizrach. They say there was in Slonim or in Branovich there was a Talmud in the Slonim Yeshiva. Later he was the unofficial Rosh Yeshiva. They also called him the unofficial Rebbe. It was a tzaddik, a Talmud Chacham, Rabbi Moshe Mudner. He was an Ish Kadosh. I think they said that Rabbi Baruch Ber once said that he went to Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim made him wait outside until he finished talking to Rabbi Moshe Mudner. So Rabbi Baruch Ber once watched him dance Simchas Torah for over an hour. They said, Rabbi Baruch Ber watched the Rebbe dance. He said, Reb Chaim kept me out. I could watch him dance. So they say Rabbi Chanan once said to him, he says, so what do Hasidim do? They make fun of people that sit by the Mizrach Vant. Right? So that's what's different. You just turn the Mizrach wall, so they sit by the Marav wall. So what do you do? So you turn the Marav wall into the Mizrach wall. So they're the Baal Gaiva for sitting by the Marav wall. So what did you really accomplish? It's just it's the same problem with Gaiva. So he said, you're right. The purpose is to turn your heart around. If you just move from Mizrach to Marav, you can be a Baal Gaiva by sitting by the Marav wall. and insisting on what kind of an onav you are, letting everyone know who you are. When they say the guy was sitting by a rock in sackcloth and he fasted for the tzaras of Klal Yisrael, someone passed by and said, this Yid has been fasting 6 years, ben Shabbos l'Shabbos of the tzaras of Klal Yisrael. And he pokes his head out from the sackcloth. He goes, 7 years. Okay, get that straight. You know what I mean? So if he's smart enough, he wouldn't have said it, but he would think it. They say the Alter Fischel said there is no bigger Baal Chayiv than someone who demands kavod. Someone that gets used to honor and kavod, then you're in trouble. Then you always have to come on to people, right? Nobody wants to come on to people. But once you get into that groove where you need a certain amount of kavod, then you're always having, wherever shul you go to, wherever you have simcha you go to, you have to come on to people. He says, it's gefährlich, it's rachmanis. And the halach is, if somebody was rich and he became poor, so within the context of tzedakah, you have to provide for him to a similar means of what he had before. And under certain circumstances, Chazal say, even a slave, if he was used to slaves running in front of him, or sus lirkav olav, so you have to give it to him. He says, but what a rachmanis on a person that's meshubit to a sus. He needs a sus lirkav olav to live. For him, it's his bread. It's a big, I've shared this with you many times. My one Gabbai experience and my last Gabbai experience came when I was 15 years old in a bungalow colony. It was a Shabbos before the summer. So there was all of maybe 10 people there. There was a comb a minyan, barely a minyan. And there was a Shayna Yid over there. He was an older person. I'll be danim l'kav schus that he was maybe not all there. And I immaturely and naively called him up to Chamishi. Whoa, he gave me this look. And what I did wrong. Then he finished the bracha. When we got to Shishi, he finished the bracha and right away held on to the Sefer Torah. And he said, Baruch Hashem and Vayrach, and he made the next bracha by Shishi. Turned around and said, don't you ever do that to me again. I had no clue what he was talking about. I didn't know what he did. And I'm not sure whether that was a bracha l'vatala or not, but he needed it. That was, it says, I forgot, I saw in a Sefer someplace he brings that somebody came up into Shemayim, they did his din v'cheshbon, they told him, okay, certain averas, you have a choice. He says, what's my choice? He says, your choice is a few minutes of, Gehenna, or the other choice is, he says, once you were like really, really upset that you didn't get a chashuv ha'aliv. So do you want to replay that in front of everybody in Olam Haba? He says, that sounds much easier. So they replayed the scene, he came running out, he said, I'll pick the Gehenna. You have no idea how embarrassing it is. If a person makes an issue of whether he had the kavod or whether he didn't have the kavod. Now, the emes is, it's just so sad that people are desperate for recognition. And they don't realize that by pursuing kavod as we do in this world, and they're not limited to any one particular sect of people. Everyone can fall into the trap. The Kotzka said, Kina tav of kavod, it's seen as Adam in a olam, that generally speaking, and it's so true, he says all three are negeya at all times. You have to fight off kina, tava, v'kava, jealousy, temptation, and honor. He says primarily in the first part of your life it's taiva. Middle part of your life it's kina. My brother-in-law did this shidduch, he did that shidduch. And toward the end of your life it's kavod. But he says, it doesn't stick. But that's what you have to aim in on. He says, be careful. Be careful as you enter different phases of life that you don't fall into that trap. You know that when the credit cards first came out, they weren't called credit cards. They were called debt cards. If you look back, it's Rabbi Rietti, he has a nice shmooze on it. He says it didn't go very far. You want a debt card? A debt card. Who wants a debt card in their pocket? Didn't work. He says, imagine you get an envelope that says, here, guess what? You're entitled to $50,000 of free debt. It's all yours. And if you sign up by tomorrow morning, you get $100,000 of debt. Didn't work. So what they called it a credit card, but it was still a debt card. Still was a debt card. It wasn't a credit card. Life insurance wasn't originally called life insurance. It was called what it really is, death insurance. But very few people are going to buy death insurance. So you call it life insurance. We change the name. That's all. They change the name and all is well. Put a different sticker on it. Baked after Pesach. That's it. Put the sticker on, baked after Pesach, and then you're fine. It doesn't say which Pesach, though. You notice. It doesn't say which year. I remember when I got married quite a few years ago. 3 decades ago. That I remember someone coming to my father and he was crying his heart out for a bracha. And he said, he was, I don't want to use the word Rebbe, Rav, or I don't want to make, whatever he was, he had some kind of a small thing he was starting out with, whatever he was. And my father was like so stuck because there was so many, family and whatever, and the Rosh Hashivas, I'd love to give you. He says, maybe you come for benching. No, I need a bracha under the chuppah. He goes, why do you need a bracha under the chuppah? He says that, I need it for my wife. He's moida the shalom bayis in his house, and this is going to give him stature. He needs it for his kehillah. So I remember saying to a friend of mine afterwards, I said, what a rachmanis on him. He says, what a rachmanis. He tells me what a wife he has. That's what she needs. So he said, you know what? His wife is in the same trap. She's going to tell you, I don't really need it. I need it because my father, I have to show my father, I need it for my sister. Everyone needs it for someone else. The Shina Barav once said, he said to a person, why don't you take off half a day and learn? You have enough money to live. He says, you think I'm working for myself? He says, I'm working for my child. He says, everyone's working for their child. He says, I'd like to see that child already that everybody's working for. All these generations, everyone's working for their children. Lamach saying the kind that everyone's working for. They're giving up your whole ruchnius, your whole life for the child. So the emes is, we want recognition. And no one is immune. If you fall into this trap, there is no one in this world that is immune. The irony is that the greatest respect and recognition that we have is not by insisting on Sandakais, and not by insisting on Shishi, and not by, there once was a Rav. They asked him, do you want Shlishi or Shishi? He says, I don't want Shlishi, I don't want Shishi, I want a Haisafa. If you understand what I'm saying. He said, I want to raise for the extra thing. They once asked Rebbetzin Kanievsky who was the bravest woman that she ever saw. And who in her eyes is like the biggest tzedekis, the biggest Mesiras Nefesh that she encountered. And make a bracha, Rabbi. Rebbetzin Kanievsky said that there was a woman, her husband was very rich. He was in the construction business. He lost every last penny he had. And he went from the CEO to have to sign up and do bricklaying. Which meant he went from a job that required no work to a job that did work. Right? You know the story? Just a mashal. That they hired a bunch of cannibals in a company. They said because they don't want to discriminate against everyone, but they warned them that they cannot eat any people on the job. Now you all promised, and they, a few weeks later, the guy calls them in. He says, that the janitor's been missing for 3 days. And as I'm warning you, not us, They walk out, they all turn to each other. They go, "Shite! If we would have eaten the CEO, nobody would have known. What do you have to eat the janitor for?" Okay. So he went from being the CEO of this company, Nebuch, and he became the bricklayer. He said his wife used to dress up for him, and she went out to greet him, like mamish, in the same way they had to move out of their house into a shack. And she spoke about her husband in the same glowing terms after he was reduced to a bricklayer and to her dying day. And Rebbetzin Kanievsky said to her that was the bravest woman that she knew. That she knew who she was. Rabbi Victor Miller, Zechut Tzadik L'Vracha, has a tape I think should be mandatory listening for every chassan. It's called the 10 Commandments of Marriage. I will not go through all 10 commandments. Well, maybe one of them he says, you want to fight? Close the windows first. That's an important one. But one of the things he says your husband is a Baal Kaira, he's the best Baal Kaira in the world. He's a shoemaker, he's the best shoemaker in the world. Your wife makes Lakshan Kugel, it's the best Lakshan Kugel in the world. He says you want recognition, you want respect. You get respect by giving somebody else respect. That's how a person gets respect. I was saying there's a dumpster parked on your block, right? So I see this guy parking behind it. And he parks all the way up. And he's like, boom, into it. I said, we want me to pick your car and put it in. Like what? He says, no, that's the mile about a dumpster. He says, you can zets up in front of it. He says, who cares? He says, there was another car. I didn't want this guy to come out and give it to me. There's more parking space with a dumpster. I said, a lot of times we want more parking space for ourselves on the cheshbon of someone else. If you consider the other person a dumpster, so you move in, you don't give anyone space. You don't give anyone room. If you consider the other person a human being, so it's very, very different. The Steipler once told the Bacher, the reason you didn't do a shidduch yet is because you think you're the best Bacher in the world. You think every girl in the world wants you. So you have to marry one girl, you're turning down all the girls in the world. It's very hard to do. He says, you know why the other Bachrim, your age, all did Shidduchim, they come in, who's going to want me? So a person wants them, they're all excited. He says, you have your opposite problem. Unless you change who you are, it's going to be very different. And trust me, like they say, I may not be smarter, I may not older, I've been a Rebbe a good 30 years, and I know what kids say. And the kids that respect their parents are not the ones that the parents made it big. It's not the ones that the parents are honored by dinner. It's not the ones that the parents have yachts and they have Maseratis and BMWs. The kids that have a relationship and a love with the parents are the ones that the parents spend time with their kids. And they give the child a recognition. And they're not comparing one child against the other. And they recognize each child for who he is. So those people that spend their lives trying to get covered because I just need it, I want to be remembered. I want my kids, I want my wife, I want my husband to respect me. It's the opposite. It's exact. You give recognition, they will respect you. I think we've seen in the events over the past week, so that missiles don't discriminate, right? They have no derech eretz for anyone who has shishi. That makes, if you have velvet on your collar, you don't, then they do have an interesting thing. I heard today, believe it or not, 1,400 missiles were fired. Now, of course, the statistics game is a dangerous game because for Nebuch, the person that is grieving, it doesn't help him what the statistics are. But when you look at the overall statistics, you can't help but see the open nisim and miracles here. So one of the things that they're toiled on in B'derech HaTeva is the Iron Dome system, which is really shooting a bullet with a bullet, which is an amazing thing. So they're saying that the Iron Dome system shot down 400 out of the 1,400 missiles, which may not sound like all that good of a batting average. However, it discerns between a missile that is heading toward a populated place as opposed to a missile that's heading toward an open field. Because there is risk with the missile shooting down a missile, the debris of the missile itself could cause destruction. The missile itself could miss and then cause... and it's also like, what, $10,000 a missile? You know, how much is it each missile? $40,000 a missile, right. I was once, I kid you not, I was once in the mikveh and there was an old yid, he said, "Wiffel cost this?" He said, "30, $40,000 a missile." He goes, "Stick your head up for it." He goes, "Send some over here." $40,000 a missile, he goes. Okay. So the way this Iron Dome system works is it discerns between a missile that's heading toward an open field as opposed to a missile that's heading toward a populated area. The missile that's heading toward an open field, it's not kedai to knock it down. You know, it's very interesting. Try to think about this in terms of our davening to Hashem. We daven to Hashem, let me find a parking place. Hashem, please let me find a parking place. Why aren't you listening to my tefillos? So Hashem says, look, your life is going to be in danger. If you would know what's going on in your veins right now, you're in the danger of a heart attack because it's almost closed your artery. Right now, there's a mugger behind you that's about to pull out a pistol on your thing. So you want me to use up your schus on the parking space? Mm-hmm. If the Iron Dome discerns between the missile that's headed to a populated area as opposed to the missile's going to land in an open area, it's not batant, but it's not worth using up the missile, don't we think that a Kadosh Baruch Hu B'roiv Rachamov applies the same mahalach? That when you ask a Kadosh Baruch Hu for things that annoy us in life and we don't get it, it's because a Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I am saving the missile for the things in your life that you need. So the Akopan of the missiles, some missiles did get through, and they didn't have derech eretz for people that said even on. They did have derech eretz for people that have Mesiras Nefesh. For people that learn Torah Lishma. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Zolzain Gesund gave out the letter, come to Bnei Brak. Chazonish said, that's it, the best Iron Dome. Chazonish's bracha. He says it keeps going. The bracha keeps going. When there's derech eretz, when there's Torah, when there's Mesiras Nefesh, then it keeps going. I heard a terrible one. This went off the records. They said that there was this bacher from Panovich who joined the army, and he misunderstood today when they told him, cease fire, so he began to shoot. He said, he thought cease fire, okay, forget that, skip that one. So I have a cousin in Eretz Yisrael who told me that 3 blocks from his house, or 3 houses away from his house, this story was around, but he just gave me a little bit more pratim. These sirens went off Shabbos morning. Shabbos morning. when all, the house is full of women and children and the kids are playing and you're yelling to them to be quiet and, the fathers are off in shul. And the sirens went off and people began to run here and there to the secure room. They did get it, they didn't get it. And they heard a thud, but no explosion. And the guy from the upstairs apartment, who apparently is not slow makbid on the Zman Krishma, Shabbos morning, he comes down, he says that some tiles fell from the ceiling. They said, listen, this was not a missile. There's no tiles fall from your ceiling. Your ceiling falls, not the tiles on the ceiling. Still, Shabbos afternoon, someone went up to check. He looked around. He said there's a little roof on top. He went all the way on top. There's what they call the Dutch Shemesh, the sunbar. Everything seems okay. Sunday afternoon, somebody else went up to check. And he, I guess, applied more peripheral vision. He looked all the way around. And he saw what looked like the head of a rocket on one corner of the roof. And he looked like the tail of a rocket on the other corner of the roof. Not only did the rocket hit this building, it actually cracked in half. They still weren't sure if it was real or not. They called whoever one calls in Eretz Yisrael when there's two parts of a missile on your roof. He said they came down and they evacuated that building so quick. And they were outside for 6 hours and eventually they carried it down. And they later told them that that missile, whatever wire, was off by a quarter of a millimeter. And that was one of the stronger missiles. I forgot the things. He says that would have leveled this apartment house. And it hit the top of the apartment house and it broke in half. Okay? I want to tell you something. That somebody in this apartment house, either went and worked on someone else's shalom bayis, somebody made suppers for a lady that wasn't feeling well. There was an iron dome system in this apartment house. Somebody was learning Torah L'Shema. This is what someone's chus, because al pi derech hateva, missiles don't hit tops of apartment house and break in half and cease to explode. So there are iron dome systems in our life that we have to build. I think we've mentioned this story once before that someone told me that somebody had genevas in a certain section. I forgot where it was in Eretz Yisrael. So he built a gate. And the guy on top, there's only a Jew can think this way. He says, no, you're being mafsid me. Because you're building a gate. The guy could climb on the gate and could even jump into the second room apartment. He says, I'm not letting you build a gate. And there was a whole Torah and a whole fight. So the guy on the third floor said, so build it up, another one. He said, what about the guy that's going to jump into your house? He said, I'm more worried about machlokes than I'm worried about the guy. So they built it up. He says a few weeks later, there was a fire in his house. And the front door was jammed, and he and his wife and children were able to escape by climbing onto this gate that was near the window on the third floor and climbing down. The gate saved their life. There are iron dome systems that HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows us to build in the course of our lives. So you have an opportunity of chesed, you have an opportunity of doing something right. Understand. I'll tell you a story that I had a couple of weeks ago. I asked a kid to go downstairs and bring up lunch for an older yid who learns in the yeshiva, and unfortunately he was not feeling well. And I said, the kid was like, Rabbi, I'm finished anyway, well, what's the point of me doing it? I said, please bring up the lunch for him. He says, you want to be a tzaddik? And he gives me this look, I'm no tzaddik. I said, the moment you bring up the lunch, you're a tzaddik, okay? He says, no, you don't know what I did. Let me tell you something. When you bring up that lunch, you're a tzaddik, okay? I don't know what happens a minute before, a minute afterwards, but that's how the Rebbeinu Shalom works. See, say for time in the Torah, because Baruch Hu doesn't offset mitzvahs to averos. When you do the mitzvah, you're a tzaddik. Somebody once came to the chayza about a maser, and the chayza looked at the kvittel. He said he's a big tzaddik. For him, he went back a few minutes later. He said, he's the biggest Rasha. What happened? He said then some say he was lighting Chanukah lech then, some say he was by a bris milah, some say pink then he did a chesed for someone. At the moment you do a mitzvah, you're a tzaddik. So I woke up together with him, and we walked into the Beis HaMedrash to tell this yid that he has the lunch. We walk in, the Baltfil is up to which bracha as we enter, Baruch Ata Hashem, Mishana Miftach La Tzadikim. I said, you hear? Yeah, Maishi. He just said, you're a tzaddik. He says, tzadikim. So, Rebbe, you're also a tzaddik? I said, no. I'll tell you a pshat in the tzadikim. Some people, they're a constant tzaddik. Some people, they're a tzaddik, then they go back to being not a tzaddik, then they come back to being a tzaddik, so it's tzaddikim, right? It's not a one shot. You got to put it together to make a one shot, that's all. But trust me, you are a tzaddik. I'm telling you, we all are, and we don't know when we are building our own iron dome system. We don't know when you're building it. It's interesting, getting back to the union of kibudim by a chuppah. I once heard from a Rav, what is the most important, I once asked the Rav, where is it the most important, out of all the kibudim by a chuppah, out of all the honors, where the person has to be an Erlich Yid? And he said it's exactly the way the world thinks. He says the Siddur Kiddushin is it true he has to know the halacha. Kol sheni yidei the Kiddush Eili Yaisigim. If you don't know the halachas of Siddur Kiddush, you're not supposed to be a Mesader Kiddush. The Strapke V'Rav was makbid. Whenever he learned, whenever he was a Mesader Kiddush, he went through all of the halachas in Shulchan Aruch, with all of the nice kelim, with all of the mefarshim. It took him several weeks. Somebody once came to him, asked him to be a Mesader Kiddush that night. He says, "There's no way in the world I can do it." He said, "Can you make an exception?" He says, "If you have a minig and you don't say beli neder, some hold it's a neder." He goes, "Can't we be mater neder?" He says, "You want me to learn all the halachas of Ataras Nedarim? That's even longer." He said. So now, he says, we give Siddur Kiddushin, that's the biggest covet. It's true, it's the biggest covet in terms of the knowledge that he has to know. But in the etzem reality, even if the person is not a big tzaddik, if he did everything right, it doesn't affect the Kiddushin. I happen to know of a person, of a situation where a Mesader Kiddushin was very not happy with the Eidim. And he didn't know what to do. He said, "I really believe the guy's Pasal Yedis." And in quick thinking, he went and he said, "You know what? I'm giving you my Siddur Kiddushin," which the person accepted. He said, if he's Pasal Yedis, he's not going to make a shayla on the Kiddushin if he's a Mesader Kiddushin. He says, "I'll switch him to be the Eid." Now, so we consider the Siddur Kiddushin the greatest kibbud, but intrinsically it's not the greatest kibbud. Again, it's the greatest kibbud in terms of the knowledge that he has to have, but the reality of what he does, somebody can technically be standing next to him and telling him what to do. What do we consider the next biggest kibbud by a chuppah? Right, what do you give the Kriyas HaKsuba? You know what the Kriyas HaKsuba? You know who did the Kriyas HaKsuba back at home in the Hayim in Europe? The Shamus. It was the Shamus' job to come up and read the Ksuba. And the whole purpose of reading the Ksuba is only because we used to have been seen in the Eris in one shot. Now we used to do it 12 months apart. Now we do it in one shot. So you want to make a little bit of a break. But we sort of created that into the greatest covet. And the Eidim is like, that's like, all right, that's the guy, that's the consolation prize, Eidim. He says the Eidim is the most important. The guy's possibly Eidis. There's a whole shayla on the Kiddushin. It shows the irony of this world. Shows the irony of this world. It's interesting. So I was thinking about who the Eidim should be, back and forth, and we was one person we wanted because he's a real Elch guy. You know? They say that the Amshav Rebbe, I think, has only 2 people that he uses for Eidus. Like he's so makban, he gives them a whole questionnaire. They never got angry at anybody, they never stole anything, they never did anything. And he said once during the chuppah, there was a whole push line, the guy got pushed. And he ran over, don't push back, I can't lose you. I can't afford to lose you as an aid. If you push him back. So we were waiting for this. And there is a din that if someone's machabed you to be aid, you are supposed to do tshuva beforehand. You got to do tshuva in case you're chas v'shalom pasal yedus. So there was a fellow, we thought he was going to be the aid, and he was there. I didn't realize he was there. So we used someone else, and I went over to him afterwards. I said, I didn't realize you're here. He goes, you know what you made me? You made me do tshuva for nothing. He said. So what did I do tshuva for? Rabbi say, what is the inyan, b'chlal? The ksuba really is a financial contract. But Chazal wanted parties to live up to their thing, so they hinged the validity of the kiddushin on the ksuba. And if you don't know where your ksuba is, it doesn't make a difference how long you're married. You have to rewrite the ksuba. You have to rewrite the ksuba. So it's really it's financial terms. That's all what it is. But it represents the basic financial terms between a husband and wife, and you have to live up to it. But those terms change. I once heard this beer in the Indian. Originally, ksuba, it was much more like, this is what you have to give. Today it's like a standard nusach. But the standard nusach, whatever it is, means I have to live up to it. If I have $1 million in the bank, it's easy to give Messiahim Zuz. If I only have a Zuz in the bank, how do I give my Messiahim Zuz? So the answer is the ksuba establishes a standard. And we have to adjust ourselves to the standard in the course of life. So a lot of people in Seagate, in Farakwe, I don't know where, but all of their documents were washed away. So somebody was ma'or, check if you have your ksuba. Because if you don't have your ksuba, then there's a shaila, whatever, you have to quickly write up another ksuba. So somebody said he was by a ceremony, there was an 88-year-old man and an 85-year-old wife, and they rewrote the ksuba for them, and they drank a l'chaim, and they danced. I don't know if they picked them up on the chair and bounced them up and down. I said, think about the beauty of Klal Yisrael. Right? We don't change. This is our phase in life. It's a certain akaras atoyv. It's a certain amunah. So I asked you a question. There's a financial document. They're married 80 years. Yeah. So she lost her ksuba. Oh, stop! Got to rewrite the ksuba. And by now, what do you think is going to change now financially between the two of them? But the Torah doesn't look at it that way. See, Chazal didn't look at it that way. Because every year, every day of your marriage, there's different nisyonos. We change physically, we change emotionally. Our nisyonos go from kina taiva to kavod, as the Kotzke said, and therefore we readjust. And our commitments have to be readjusted, like we mentioned many times this week's Medrash, right? She said to Shlomo HaMelech, what's Hashem been doing since Ma'aseh Bereshis? Shlomo says, Mezavik Zugim, Hashem's making shidduchim. That's it. Hashem's making shidduchim. Big deal, I can do it. She picked 1,000 boys, 1,000 girls, put them together, there you go, presto. What else? Right? We'll wait till the next morning. Next morning, it's such like a thing that heads flying, hands flying, boom, crash, smash, bang. She says, okay, now I see what God does. So Frek the Maral, how long does it take to make a shidduch? So Hashem knows which shidduch goes through. It still doesn't explain what Hashem is doing since Ma'aseh Bereshis. Says the Maral, Mezavik Zevugim is not just by the chuppah. It's every moment of your life. The Shalom Bayis Nisyonis change constantly throughout life. You see it b'chush. Sometimes there's a crisis that brings a couple that was not living well together, and sometimes there's a crisis that rips couples apart. Financial situations change. Physical situations change. Health situations change. The Eibush is Mezavik Zevugim, that means the Kadosh Baruch Hu gives us the Siyata Deshmaya to be able to invest, to be able to not to treat your spouse like a dumpster, but I have to stop a little bit before. I have to give space, give recognition, be machshiv the person even after he or she retires, even after he or she can't do what they were doing beforehand. It's a different world. I was once buying a sifa, by a Shabbaton. In Matzah Shabbos, someone came over to me and said, my wife couldn't make it. Do you mind repeating what you said all Shabbos in her room? Really? And then I realized his wife was suffering from ALS, and she was there. They took this man, in order to get his wife to come, brought along 10 people, with doctors and engineers, with respirators, And I went in, and I did my best to repeat the entire Shabbos, as well as anyone else that was there. And he walks out, there was almost a tear in his eye. He says, I can tell that she was like smiling with her eyes, thank you so much. I said, do you know what it means? The ahava that we're capable of having to each other, if we understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mezavik zevugim, that doesn't mean that when you were 19 and she was 18, it means when you're 80 and she's 79, it means when you're 50 and she's 49, or vice versa. It means every single day. The Rebbe Hashem says, you do your share, I will do mine. They say the guy 70 was for his 25th anniversary, he took his wife to Florida. On his 50th anniversary, he went to pick her up. You know what I mean? He says, in every phase of life, it changes. So the Medrash says an interesting thing. After the one Medrash says, the Eibush says, Mezavik Zevugim. The other Medrash says, you know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is creating ladders. That's what he's doing since Sheshes Mebereshis. That means that we're constantly faced with different nisyonos, and it's our decision whether we go up the ladder or whether we go down the ladder. I once heard, what's the bracha? The zivig l'oila yafazayin. You ever heard that expression? The zivig l'oila yafazayin. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes zivugim, right? So let's say you have a real rich guy that wants to marry a poor girl, right? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu has an eitzah. But the rich guy becomes poor, only it's a good shidduch. Or, one person, whatever, 1,000 other mishalim. So the Rebbe Hashem has different ways of being mezavik zevugim. One way is to bring someone down, or the other way is to make the girl rich. So we give a bracha, the zivig zal oili yafazan. That the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu should make shidduchim is by taking the person with the deficiency and bringing them up, as opposed to the other way around. So be'etzem, why do we need edus by kedusha? What do we need witnesses for? So whether the Rishonim go into it, whether it's the L'raya, whether it's part of the Chalois HaKedush, you won't get it. You need witnesses. But an aid, the Torah calls aid as someone who defines reality. He can discern, he can differentiate reality from perception. We live in a world of perception. I was in the post office today. You ever in the post office? There's 15 windows and only 2 workers there. And the line snakes out the door. Right? And there's 6 managers behind just sitting there schmoozing. I said, have 1 window or 2 windows. At least, what are you steching me? We're out. I passed by, I saw an advertisement for a business that arranges for you a 212 area code. So somebody was sitting in the class and said, why would anyone want a 212 area code? I said, I don't know. I said, I guess it looks better if you have a Manhattan office. So really, he's in the basement on Avenue, you know what I mean, on Avenue J and East 35th Street. It looks like he's in Park Avenue. It's a world of perception. And an aide has to be able to say, this is not a world of perception, okay? For marriage to work, it has to be real. Aidus has to say, that's why if he's gambles, or he's living in a world of glamour and glory, or perceived glamour and glory, which is a world of sheker, he can't be an aid. He's possibly aidus. The marriage has to be real. Has to be real. You can't be the guy that's looking for shishi. I once had one when I first started teaching. So I have an older Rabbi who told me, gave me this rule in the classroom. And I hold whatever success, I had my share of successes and failures like everyone else does. But whatever success I ever had teaching was this Nakuda. He says, have a roll book in front of you. He says, there should not go by 15 minutes that you don't mention the name of every child in the class. So Moshe, what do you say? So if the kid asks a question, fine. You know, of course you have to, Baruch, sit down, then that, you know, I don't mean that. But he meant to say, because there are kids that get lost. He says you can't do any greater damage to a kid if a kid sits there. I hope this doesn't come out the wrong way, Rabbi say. Somebody once told me that my kid's going through the system, what should I do? I didn't say this, but someone sitting next to me said, and of course he meant this just as a metaphor, he said, let him take a brick and throw it to the principal's office. I said, why? He'll be suspended, he'll be taken back, they'll work with him, and they'll get people that are Isaac and Mechazik, and if he doesn't do that, he'll just go through the system. You're not allowed to let kids go through the system. You have to give people recognition. That's what Aedis is. Aedis is, what do you mean he doesn't exist? I've heard children say they were very hurt. That their parents or rebbeim or teachers, it could be anybody, that they're not mentioned. You know, the troublemaker gets mentioned. He's not the big chacham, he's not the big tippish, he's not the troublemaker. And this has changed a lot over the years. It's changed a lot. And Chas v'shalom, the last thing I want to do is criticize rebbeim there. But the obligation that we have as parents and as rebbeim, you have to give children recognition. Give your spouse recognition. It changes the world. There's another Nakuda as well. I heard the story from the Sound of Nerov. That he says there was a yid, he was trying to blow shofar. He threw the talus over his head, gets ready, makes the bracha, thunders. Every strange sound in the world is coming out. No sound's coming out of the shofar. Everyone's giving it eights. Finally, one guy goes, picks the talus, puts it up on top of his head, blow now. He blows, kasong. They said, what happened? He says, how did you, because the pressure from the thing, the air pressure, the talus apple, he says, listen, you threw the talus over your head, the Satan got all nervous. Oh, who's blowing over there? Which big tzaddiks that bring Mashiach? You know, he don't stop you. He picked up you, blow. Blog is into high too. We try to be who we're not. You know, the Satan starts up with us. Now, I want to point this out. In the reality of our lives, there is siyata d'shmai. It doesn't make a difference whatever deficiency I have, or my spouse has, my Rebbe has, my Talmud has, my father has, my child has. If we deal with reality, Hashem says, if I gave you this reality, you will have the siyata d'shmai to deal with. If we live in a perception, if we live in a dream which is not there, there's no siyata d'shmai for that, because that's not the reality. It's what you considered yourself to be reality. Someone's going to call Atzala and say, okay, where's your address? He goes, Park Avenue. You know, he's embarrassed to say that he lives, you're killing yourself. You know, if your 89 Astro, have to mention that once at least during the year, right? Needs a new fuel pump, and the guy in the auto parts store says, okay, for what model? A 212 BMW. Doesn't pass. I'm embarrassed. It's very nice, but it's not going to fit. It's not going to work. Why by tefillah, when you're davening for someone, you mention the name of that person, bend the mother's name? Why? Because it has to be reality. The Gemara says with the father, there's no chazaka, but there's only a chazaka that it's the father. By the mother, we know for sure it's the mother. In order for tefillah to work, and that's why in reality, we create malachim. With mitzvahs, we create malachim, real malachim. Malachim lekim, oilim b'yardim bai. So Rashi says why the malach goes up first and then comes down. I think we mentioned this last year. Somebody once told me that somebody, his zayda, he was nifter, they thought he was an amoritz. He left a bunch of pack of ksavim. Said, no one should print it. Should bury it with him. So they went to a Rav. We see our Zayda was a big tzaddik. He left all these something. Should we take a print it or not listen to what he says? Maybe the world needs it. He says, let me see some of it. So he looks at it, he turns Parasha Vayetzei, he asks Akasha, why do malachim need ladders? They can fly. He says, some they were baby malachim. They didn't know how to fly yet. So he calls them and he goes, Yezayda said, bury it, bury it. Yeah, yeah. To listen to the words of a tzaddik, you know, like, what does it mean, Malachi Elokim oilim the Yarden boy? Says Rashi, that the malachim of Chutz La'aretz first went up, and the Chutz La'aretz malachim came down. You know what that means? That means that Yaakov Avinu said, I'm not in denial, I'm leaving Eretz Yisrael now, I'm going into Chutz La'aretz. I'm going to be in a very different kind of world, very different kind of Nisyonis. And they understand it's not going to be the same. Some say that's why he went to learn the yeshiva of Shem ve'Ever. Because in Yitzchak's yeshiva, it was all b'kedusha b'tahara. But Shem ve'Ever, he dealt with the Dar HaMabel. I have to have training. It's not going to be the same. I'm going to have to learn how to be a Yaakov Avinu in Lavan's house. When a person is willing to deal with reality, oilim b'yarden boy. In other words, the aliyah of the malachim, of his Eretz Yisrael malachim, they had their ultimate aliyah. What does it mean? You did a mitzvah and your malach goes up. It goes up and it's, like the Nefesh HaChaim says, it demands chusim for you. It demands protection for you. It's your iron dome of Shemayim. When Yaakov said, I may not be the Yaakov, I'm not going to get Shishin, I'm not going to be the Yitzchak's son. I'm going to be rough and tough in Lavan's house, and when I need you to help me through this, regardless of what it takes. It is precisely when someone is willing to recognize that he's going into Chutz La'aretz, he's going to deal with these Nisyonos head on, he's not giving up, that the Malachim of Eretz Yisrael have an aliyah. If he enters Chutz La'aretz and he's still in dream world, he's not willing to deal with the reality, the Malachim of Eretz Yisrael don't go up. He takes them with him into Chutz La'aretz, and they're not the Malachim of Chutz La'aretz. They don't know how to deal with it. That's what it means that Kadosh Baruch Hu creates ladders. The Rebbe Hashem gives us the Siyata, the Shemayas, Pliyadik Medrash. The Medrash says, Moitzi Asurim B'Kasharis. So it says, Moshe V'Chidim Baisim, Moitzi, the Eibishter took out the people that were tied in his man kosher. So Chazal dashed this on marriage. That Moshe V'Chidim Baisim, Moitzi, so the Medrash says like this. The Medrash takes the word B'Kasharis and breaks it up into two. Man the boy, Bachi. If you want, you can cry. Man the boy, Shira. Right? B'Chisharis. Either cry, it's your choice. In every marriage, it's your choice. You want to complain, you want to look at someone else, you want to have tinnitus, you're going to spend your life crying. You want to have shira, then it's your choice. It depends what you're looking at. You're trying to show off to the world, you're thinking only about yourself, you move up against the dumpster, you're going to cry. If you decide, this is my job, is to give recognition, my job is to be mishabeach, my job is not to add up a scorecard of all the things that were said wrong to me, let me do the right thing now, then it's shira. It's your choice. Man the boy, whoever wants to cry, man the boy shira. You're the one that's doing it, no one else. You're the only one. So the Chassam Sofer says, Yaakov Avinu goes to sleep. For 14 years he didn't sleep. That was the first time he goes to sleep. Then why did he go to sleep now? How come he didn't stay up to learn now also? So it's different to this, because some Sefer says an interesting thing. It says Yitzchak thought one of the reasons Esav doesn't learn is because Esav is in the forest, and there's chayos, and in the chayos there's tinuf, there's the excrement of the chayos and so on. You're not allowed to learn over there. And that's why he's not learning. So Yaakov Avinu is building this thing around the chayos. He says, wait a second, I'm not allowed to learn here. So he goes to sleep. Then he has the dream. He says, there's no tinuf over here, there's no dirt over here. Now they wouldn't have the nevuah, wouldn't have had the prophecy. So he said, had I known, lo yeshanti, I would have not slept. Had I known this wasn't the makom metunif, I would have not slept. That's what some Sefer says. Let's take this a step deeper. The Baal Shem Tov says that if somebody really wants to learn, and he does not learn, because he's in a place where you're not allowed to learn, he was Mekayim Kol HaTorah Kula. He was just Mekayim Kol HaTorah Kula. Why? Because he applied every single halacha to himself. Now, of course, if a person never ever learns, and he also doesn't learn in the bathroom, you can't say that. But if he's learning wherever he's learning, any chance he has, he learns. Then he goes into the bathroom and says, here, I'm not allowed to think and learn. Right? Zalman of Allah had these big color things in the bathroom to distract him because it was hard for him not to think and learning. But if a person always learns, and he's not learning because it's in a makam up to noifes, so that means that you're applying yourself to every halach in the Torah that you're not learning now. So in a way, you're being mekayim kol HaTorah kula. There are times in our life where we're beaten down, where we live in a makam metunif. There's no room to move. And we feel, I'm trying to learn, it's not going. I'm trying to come to night, say it's not going. I'm trying to learn that for Yami. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm trying. Coming to terms, this is my matziv in life, and I will keep trying, means I connect to Kol HaTorah kula. In Parshas Vayetzei, no pay, no samach. You're Mavasedra. In a way, if you don't go pasuk by pasuk, it's easy to be Mavasedra. You go in one shot all the way through. Why no pay? Why no samach? What's the purpose of a pay and a samach in the pasuk? Litin rebach lizbainim and parsha l'parsha, to give you time to think between one parsha and the other parsha. So it was given in small segments. In Parshas Vayetzei, the Lechovitch said, "There's no time to think. There's a time in our life, it's Parshas Vayetzei. Yaakov lost all of his money. He has to deal with love and the most money-loving person in the world. He has to somehow build Klal Yisrael. He's up against the wall. There's no time to think, I should have, could have, I'm angry, I'm hurt, I'm this, my brother. You gotta move on. There's no time to stop. Move on with life. That's it, there's no pay, there's no samach. What's the difference between a pay and a samach? Anyone know? So what is the thing? Parsha, the Mishnah Berurah is in Hilchos Tefillin. I don't remember correctly, but I think that if there's a samach, it's stuma. There's no space in the Sefer Torah by a pay. There is space. I was thinking like this as a remes, no pun intended. But there are signs no parking, and there are signs no standing. Pay and samach. There's parking and standing. There are times in your life you could stop to rest a little bit. You just can't park. There are times you can't stand. You can't even stop to stand. There are times in your life when you're dealing with Esav, when you feel you're going from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz, when you're being challenged, when the one you want to marry disappears from your hands and it's Leah and there's a love on and everything in the world has gone about as bad as it could go, and suddenly a person is used to Torah and is in a makkah metunaf, and how do I get out of this? If I can't learn the way I don't have the menuchas hanefesh of the mind to learn, how does life go on? You don't stop. You have to keep on going. Now think about this. After all is said and done, the only reason there were 12 Shvatim from Rachel and Leah is because they didn't have any money, and that's how he had to work, and that's why Leah came first, and then came Rachel, and then only because she had the pain of not having children was Bilhah and Zilpah. The whole Parshas Vayetzei is pain, but the whole Parshas Vayetzei is the birth of Klal Yisrael. The Yaakov Avinu comes and he says to the shepherds, why was everyone sitting, what are you sitting around? You look like city workers over here. What are you doing? Move! You know, they say the story that they made an alarm, and I said this last week, I don't remember. They made an alarm for the fire department against to get stuck in a burning building, and no one's moved for 2 minutes. They should know he's not there. They said if you put that in all the city workers, the place will be ringing away there. Now, Yaakov comes, he says, Lo ya'esa asaf mikna. It's not the time to gather in the mikna. Hashkis etzayin etziru. So the Zohar HaKadosh says that Yaakov wanted Mashiach to come. He wanted the Gul. There's going to be a long time before Mashiach. So Yaakov said, Lo ya'esa asaf mikna. It's not time to gather in the sheep for Mashiach. At least hashkis etzayin. At least give parnasa. At least Klal Yisrael should have an ability, give them the koyach to survive in Galus. But it's totally zeh b'zeh. If someone comes to terms, guess what? It's not time for Mashiach. I'm going to have to tough it out. Then you're zoicha to the hashkas at Tzayin at Tzivru. So it's an interesting thing. Esav, Chassan gets married. The Eibush says, Michael, all of his Averis. Where do we learn it from? We learn it from Esav. Esav married the daughter of Yishmael. So the Gemara says, Machlas, her name wasn't Machlas, her name was Basmas. So it's a simon when you get married. The Eibush says, Michael, you're Averis. That's so nice. Couldn't we learn that from someone else instead of? Could we learn that from a pasuk by Yaakov marrying Rachel, marrying Leah, Yitzchak and Yehuda? From Esav we have to learn it. Esav, Rashi says, this was like he wasn't getting married over here. He was this political conspiracy. The Medrash says he had this whole idea. He's going to marry the daughter of Yishmael. He's going to make sure Yishmael gets killed. That's going to give him a right to avenge the death of Yishmael. Will be able to kill Yaakov. His whole plan over here was murder, and this was mob city. This was like Chicago, Al Capone. This was like. So pick from here, you learn out when you get married, you're Michael, you're Averis. You're Adrabah. The Rebbe says, why when a person gets married, are you Michael as Averis? Because you're being mashlim the Bria. Hashem has a plan for the Bria. In order for the Bria to work, people have to get married, they have to be generations. You can make all the cheshbainas in the world. You're going to marry the one Hashem wants you to marry. And Hashem says, Lamaisa, you're being mashlim my plan to the Bria. I'm Michael, you're Averis, I'm giving you a new chance. A guy says, I want a shidduch where I could sit and learn with Yigiyah the rest of my life. Oh, he's being mashlim debriya. That's the Rebbeinu Shem's plan. But this guy marries that woman for a totally different reason. Anything but Kiddusha, if the marriage happens, the Rebbeinu Shem's plan. So we dafka learn that out from Esav, who's the biggest manipulator in the world, and we're saying even him, where Michael is Averis. So it says Rachel, right? One of the reasons Rachel wanted children is why? What does Rashi say? Because this way, if something breaks, she can blame it on the child. That's the reason to have children. That's why Rachel said, I'm going to die if I don't have children, because this way when the plate breaks, until now Yaakov said, Rachel, who broke that plate? I want to know who broke that plate. And now, your son did it. That's the reason. I said, what does Rashi mean here? Someone doesn't have children for a while. Right? And the kid comes and, also there's the sound of a breaking plate. And he goes, how do you do that? He goes, Baruch Hashem for that sound of a breaking plate. So Rachel wanted, the mother's love for a child is so great that even when the mother has to diaper the child, even when the mother has to deal with what the child broke, there's still so much love. She said, the MS, it's always, whatever Hashem does is full of love. But with a child, you see it. That's what she wanted. You get married, you have Baruch Hashem a lot of einiklach, so the photographer never has to deal with everybody, and you deal with this grand picture, your sons-in-law, and all your grandchildren. They all got to sit down, they're all dressed in their nice dresses, and the things that there was big negotiations of who should wear which dress, and there was a Congress and a Senate and a this and that to approve it, and they're all here, and so I remember once, I had this new photographer, he's like, he wants a perfect picture. Got a perfect picture. You have 50 little, 20, 30, whatever it is, little pitzalach crying away, perfect picture. Yeah, one of the babies blinked. You're going to wait for every baby not to blink. So take the picture again. By now, the photographer decided to put all the boys in the back. So there was this whole prop behind. That prop was on the floor. Whee! Boom! Knocked down the mechitza behind it. There was a bunch of people, people are screaming and yelling. He goes, do me a favor, let one kid blink, okay? It's never going to be perfect. You want your life to be perfect and nobody blinks, then they're not kids, then they're statues. You want children? Guess what? Children blink. That's what happens. I was had a Shabbat brachas in a nursing home for covered one of the Zaydis that's there, and we're up there asking different Yidden to come down. So there's a Yid over there. I don't know how old he is. He's been around many decades. So Zayn Gesundenstark. It says to me for 40 years, he was the one that 4 o'clock in the morning opened the door of his shul. He used to say out Tillim before everyone comes. Tell me which shul he davened in. He points to the mezuzah of his door, and he says that the Rav of his shul came and put in this mezuzah for him. And he came into the nursing home. That was like his chizik. And then he had a whole shaila, because there's a room, and there's a little hallway, and then it goes into the main hallway. He said he wanted the other door also to have a mezuzah. So the Rav came back, said, they gave him permission, banged in another mezuzah. He said, every morning at 4 o'clock, you know what I do? I wheel myself out between these two doors. He said, Hashem made it just for me. I don't have to wake up my roommate, and I say out the whole Tillim. So I want to tell you something. You want to know we have a lot of iron domes. And when Mashiach is going to come, Hashem is going to show us who we are. And if we have seichel to recognize life and to pick the shira instead of the b'chia, then we will be Zaychel Asalavai to be honored to have been one of those iron domes.
Amen. Yeah.